I begged for an extension on rent, the alpha landlord whispered. On one condition. So there I was, on my knees in a Cambridge parking garage at 11:47 p.m., begging a man I'd never met not to evict me. Not my finest hour. But here's the part nobody tells you about rock bottom. It smells like motor oil and defeat, and sometimes, it comes with glowing amber eyes staring at you from the shadows. Yeah, glowing. Because Murphy Valgerder wasn't just my landlord. He was something else entirely. And the one condition, he whispered that night, it didn't involve money. Before we proceed, I want you to go to the comment section. Drop a comment and tell us where you're listening from. Manchester, Maryland, New Jersey, Valleys of Wales, UK, Europe, or anywhere else in the world. It means more to us than you know. And if supernatural romance and werewolf tales hold a special place in your heart, please like this video, subscribe to Gracie Werewolf Storybank, turn on the notification bell, and share this with someone who loves getting lost in powerful stories. Now, let's get started on this super interesting werewolf story. Chapter 1. The Eviction Notice. Teresa Nolan was not a quitter. She'd survived student loans from NYU, a marketing degree that landed her exactly 0 job offers, and a mother who kept forwarding her LinkedIn articles titled, 10 Signs You're Wasting Your Potential. So when the cream-colored envelope slid under her apartment door at 6:42 a.m. on a Wednesday, Teresa knew, without opening it, that her life was about to get significantly worse. She stood there in her oversized Snoopy t-shirt and mismatched socks, staring at that envelope like it might explode. Her coffee maker gurgled in the background. Her phone buzzed with another rejected application notification, and that envelope just sat there on the scratched hardwood floor, mocking her. Teresa bent down, picked it up. The paper felt expensive, heavy, the kind of stationery people use when they're about to ruin your week with professionalism and legal jargon. She tore it open. Notice of eviction due to non-payment. Tenant, Teresa Nolan. Unit 4. C. Valgerder Properties, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Amount owed, $4,200. Eviction date, October 15th, 72 hours. Teresa read it 3 times. Then she walked to her kitchen sink, a sink that still had last night's ramen bowl in it, and threw up. Now let's be clear. Teresa wasn't some careless 20-something who blew rent money on brunch and vintage band tees. She'd been freelancing as a social media manager for a startup that turned out to be 3 guys in a WeWork who paid her in exposure and empty promises, also known as absolutely nothing. For 3 months she'd been promised payment was coming next week. For 3 months she'd believed them because believing felt safer than admitting she'd been scammed. Again. But last Friday, the company vanished. Website down. Emails bouncing. The 3 guys? Probably on a beach somewhere, spending investor money on craft beer and regret. Teresa's savings account had $87. Her fridge had string cheese and a questionable avocado. Her credit cards were maxed. Her parents had stopped answering her calls after the 5th "I just need a little help" conversation. And her landlord? She'd never even seen him. Rent checks went to a P.O. box. Maintenance requests got handled by a guy named Eugene, who smelled like cigars and asked too many personal questions. The lease was signed through an online portal. For 2 years, Teresa had lived in Unit 4C, without ever meeting the person who owned the building. Until now. Because the eviction notice had something the lease never did: a name. For inquiries, contact Murphy Valgerder directly. No email, no phone number, just an address: Valgerder Estate, 1440 Brattle Street, Cambridge. Teresa Googled it. The screen loaded, and her stomach dropped for the second time that morning. The property was a renovated Victorian mansion near Harvard Square. 3 stories, gated, ivy-covered, and worth approximately, why are you even looking at this, dollars? The kind of house you see in magazines with headlines like, Historic Homes of New England's Elite. Teresa looked at her apartment, at the water stain on the ceiling shaped like Florida, At the radiator that clanked like a ghost trapped inside. At the window that didn't close all the way and let in Cambridge winter like an unwanted houseguest. She looked back at the photo of Murphy Valgerder's estate. Then she laughed. Not a funny laugh. The kind of laugh that happens when you realize the universe has a sick sense of humor, and you're the punchline. Cool. Cool, cool, cool. I'm getting evicted by old money. She grabbed her jacket. A thrift store find with a broken zipper she'd been meaning to fix for 8 months, and headed for the door. Because here's what Teresa had learned in her 26 years on Earth. When life hands you an eviction notice, you don't cry. You don't call your mom. You don't spiral into existential dread about capitalism and the crushing weight of economic inequality. You march straight to the source and negotiate. Even if that source lives in a house that looks like it eats poor people for breakfast. Teresa took the red line to Harvard Square. The train smelled like someone's leftover Dunkin' Donuts and a cologne called Trying Too Hard. She sat next to a guy manspreading so aggressively, she was basically sitting sideways. Across from her, a woman in yoga pants scrolled through Instagram, double-tapping photos of life Teresa used to think she'd have by now. She got off at Harvard, walked past the tourists taking photos of the John Harvard statue, past the street musicians playing Wonderwall for the 10,000th time, past the guys handing out flyers for comedy shows nobody would attend. Brattle Street was quiet, tree-lined, the kind of neighborhood where people jogged with expensive strollers and owned golden retrievers named something ridiculous like Wellington. Teresa checked the address, 1440. There it was. The gate was wrought iron, Gothic, the kind you see in movies right before someone gets murdered by a chandelier. Beyond it, the driveway curved upward, lined with trees that hadn't quite lost their leaves, but looked like they were considering it. And at the end of that driveway, the house. 3 stories of stone and timber, arched windows glowing with warm light, a chimney puffing smoke like something out of a New England postcard. It looked like money, old money, the kind of money that didn't worry about rent or eviction notices or ramen for dinner 3 nights in a row. Teresa pressed the buzzer. Nothing. She pressed it again. Still nothing. She leaned into the intercom. Hello? I'm here about Unit 4C, the eviction notice. I'm not a solicitor, I swear. I'm just broke and confused, and honestly kind of angry. So if someone could just... Gates open, walk up. The voice sounded like gravel being dragged across velvet, low, controlled, the kind of voice that didn't ask questions because it already knew the answers. Teresa's stomach flipped, not in a good way, in a this might be a terrible idea way. The gate buzzed, clicked open. She pushed through. The driveway was longer than it looked, too long. Her sneakers crunched on gravel. The trees seemed taller up close. The house loomed ahead, and with every step, Teresa felt smaller, more out of place, like she was trespassing in a world that wasn't built for people like her. She reached the front door, raised her hand to knock. The door opened before her knuckles touched wood. And that's when Teresa Nolan saw Murphy Valgerder for the first time. He was tall, like, annoyingly tall, 6'4", maybe more. Dark hair that looked like he'd been running his hands through it for the past 3 hours. Sharp jawline. Flannel shirt rolled to the elbows, showing forearms that suggested he either worked out or chopped wood for fun. And his eyes. Amber. Not brown, not hazel. Amber. Like whiskey held up to a flame. He looked at her, didn't smile, didn't offer his hand, just stood there, radiating the kind of energy that said, I don't have time for this, but go ahead and waste it anyway. Teresa swallowed, tried to remember the speech she'd practiced on the train, something about hardship and good faith and payment plans. Instead, what came out was, Hi, I'm Teresa, you're evicting me. Murphy Valgerder raised one eyebrow. I know. Then he stepped aside. Come in, don't touch anything. And Teresa, despite every survival instinct screaming at her to run, walked into the house. Because sometimes when you're out of options, you walk straight into the wolf's den and hope he's in a generous mood. But here's what Teresa didn't know yet. Murphy Valgerder wasn't generous. He was calculated. And the reason he let her in? It wasn't kindness. It was curiosity. Because the moment she walked through that gate, something inside him, something he'd spent years burying, woke up. And it recognized her, not as a tenant, not as a problem, as something far more dangerous, as his. Chapter 2. The Landlord. Inside the Valgerder estate was ridiculous. Not in a gaudy way, not in a look how much money I have way, but in a way that made Teresa feel like she'd accidentally walked into someone's private museum. Hardwood floors stretched in every direction. Dark, polished, the kind that probably had a name like Brazilian walnut or something equally pretentious. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, packed with actual books. Not the decorative kind people buy by the yard to look smart. These had cracked spines, dog-eared pages. They'd been read, loved, used. A fireplace dominated the far wall, and when Teresa said fireplace, she meant a stone monstrosity big enough to stand inside. Flames crackled behind an iron grate, throwing amber light across the room. The air smelled like wood smoke and something else. Something earthy, like rain-soaked dirt and pine needles. But here's the weird part. It didn't feel cold, sterile like a showroom. It felt lived in, warm, like someone actually cared about this place, like it was a home, not an investment property. Murphy gestured toward a leather chair near the fireplace. Sit. Teresa sat. The leather was soft, worn in, comfortable in a way that suggested this chair had seen a lot of late nights and heavy thoughts. Murphy took the chair across from her, leaned back, crossed one ankle over his knee. His gaze was steady, unblinking, the kind of look that made you hyper-aware of your own breathing. Teresa felt like she was being evaluated, like he was taking inventory of everything about her, how she sat, how she moved, how she held herself under pressure. It wasn't judgmental. It was assessing, clinical, like he was trying to solve a problem, and she was the variable he hadn't figured out yet. You got a plan to pay me back? Teresa straightened. I'm applying to jobs, real ones this time. I've got interviews lined up, 3 next week alone. I just need time. Time costs money. I know, that's why I'm here. Teresa leaned forward, hands clasped between her knees. I'm asking, begging actually, for an extension. 1 month, maybe 2. I'll pay you back. With interest. I swear on my overpriced degree and my non-existent credit score. Murphy didn't respond right away. He just looked at her, like he was reading something she hadn't written yet, something under the surface. His head tilted slightly, so slightly Teresa almost missed it, like he was listening to something she couldn't hear. Then he asked the last question Teresa expected. You cook? Teresa blinked. What? Do you cook? I mean, yeah? I'm not a chef, but I can make pasta without burning the house down. I can do stir-fry. Decent scrambled eggs. Why? Murphy stood. The movement was fluid, controlled. He walked to the window, tall, arched glass overlooking the back garden, and stood there for a moment, backlit by the dying October light. His silhouette was broad, imposing. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, more measured. You want an extension? Fine. I'll freeze your rent for 2 months. Teresa's heart leapt. Seriously? Murphy turned, his amber eyes locked onto hers. On one condition. And that's when Teresa's stomach dropped, because nothing in life came without a catch. Not scholarships, not jobs, not extensions from landlords who lived in estates that belonged on the cover of Architectural Digest. What condition? Murphy stepped closer. Not fast, deliberate. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that Teresa could see the faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow, close enough to notice his hands, rough, calloused, the hands of someone who worked with them, were clenched at his sides. You move in here, he said. You cook, clean, and keep the estate running while I'm gone during the day. Non-negotiable. Teresa stared. You want me to be your housekeeper? I want you to be useful. His voice was flat, matter of fact. You do that, rent's on hold. You don't? He straightened, stepped back, put distance between them like he needed the buffer. You're out by Friday. Teresa should have said no. She should have stood up, thanked him for his time, and walked out the door. Because this was insane. This was the kind of offer that showed up in true crime podcasts titled Red Flags She Ignored. But here's the thing about desperation. It makes you calculate risk differently. And Teresa's risk calculation looked like this. Option A, say no, get evicted Friday. Sleep on her friend Indy's couch until Indy's boyfriend decided Teresa was a third wheel, and tensions got unbearable. Spend the next 6 months scrambling for sublets and depositing paychecks into an overdrawn account. Option B, say yes, move into a mansion, cook and clean for a guy who looked like he stepped out of a Patagonia catalog. Keep a roof over her head while she figured out her next move. When Teresa put it that way, the choice felt obvious. Stupid, maybe, but obvious. She looked Murphy dead in the eye. Deal. Murphy raised one dark eyebrow. Just like that? Just like that. Teresa stood, squared her shoulders. When do I start? Tonight. Go get your stuff. You've got 2 hours. Teresa's brain screamed at her the entire walk back to the red line. This is how people disappear, it whispered. This is how you end up on a missing persons poster with your mom crying on the local news. But louder than that voice, louder than logic or self-preservation, was another voice. The one that sounded like her landlord from her old apartment in Alston, the one who'd threatened small claims court. The one that sounded like her student loan servicer sending emails with subject lines like, final notice. The one that sounded like her own shame every time her mom asked how the job search was going, and Teresa lied through her teeth. She texted her best friend, Indy. Teresa. Update. Moving into landlord's mansion. Rent frozen for 2 months. I'm now a live-in housekeeper. Indy. What? Teresa. It's fine. He seems professional. Indy. Teresa. This is how Dateline episodes start. Teresa, if I go missing, you get Gerald. Indy. I don't want your cactus. I want you alive. Teresa. Too late. Already said yes. Packing now. Indy. I'm calling you in exactly 24 hours. If you don't answer, I'm calling the cops. Teresa. Deal. Teresa's apartment had never looked smaller. Or sadder. She stood in the doorway, looking at 2 years of her life crammed into 450 square feet. The futon she'd bought off Craigslist. The IKEA bookshelf she'd assembled wrong and never fixed. The kitchen table that wobbled unless you shoved a folded napkin under one leg. She packed fast. Everything she wore, stuffed into one bag. Toiletries, laptop, charger. The cactus, Gerald, which Indy had given her as a housewarming gift with the note, only living thing you're responsible for, don't kill it. She left the furniture, left the dishes, left the cheap posters she'd tacked to the walls to cover the cracks in the plaster. She took one last look. Then she locked the door, slid the key under the superintendent's door with a note that said, moved out early. Thanks for nothing, Eugene. And she went back to the estate. Murphy was waiting when she arrived. He opened the door before she knocked, like he'd been listening for her footsteps on the gravel. That all you got? Teresa hefted the duffel bag. I'm a minimalist, also poor. Murphy's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Second floor, last door on the left. Don't go in the basement. Teresa paused. Why? Bodies? Renovations. He said it so flatly, Teresa couldn't tell if he was joking. She decided not to push. She climbed the stairs, wide, creaking slightly under her weight, and found the room. The room Murphy gave her was too nice, way too nice. Queen bed with a thick navy comforter, nightstand, lamp, a window overlooking the back garden, which was bigger than her entire apartment. The walls were painted a soft gray. The floor was the same dark wood as downstairs, covered by a woven rug that looked handmade. It smelled like cedar, and that same earthy scent from downstairs, rain and pine and something wild. Teresa set her bag down, sat on the bed. The mattress was firm, supportive. She pressed her palms into it and felt the knot in her chest loosen just slightly. She pulled out her phone, texted Indy. Teresa. Still alive. Room's nice. No visible weapons or human remains. Indy. Yet. Teresa. Gerald approves. That's good enough for me. That night, Teresa tried to sleep, because at 2:47 a.m. she heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, slow, coming from the hallway. Teresa froze, her eyes snapped open. She stared at the ceiling, listening. The footsteps stopped, right outside her door. She held her breath, counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3. Then, a low sound. Not a voice, not a creak. A growl. Deep, guttural. The kind of sound that didn't come from a person. It came from something else. Something that had teeth and claws, and no interest in conversation. Teresa sat up. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Murphy? Silence. Then the footsteps moved. Away from her door, down the hall, down the stairs. The next morning, Teresa found Murphy in the living room, standing near the wide windows with a mug of coffee in his hand. He wore a gray Henley and jeans, his hair still damp like he'd just showered. He looked normal, human, nothing like the thing she'd heard prowling the halls at 2:47 a.m. Teresa leaned against the doorframe, cleared her throat. Murphy glanced up. Morning? Morning? Teresa crossed her arms. Quick question. Do you have a dog? Murphy took a sip of coffee. No? Okay, because I heard something last night, growling. Old pipes. Teresa raised an eyebrow. Pipes don't growl. Murphy set his mug down, looked at her fully. His amber eyes were calm, unbothered. You want to renegotiate the deal? Teresa hesitated, then shook her head. No? Then drink your coffee and let it go. But Teresa couldn't let it go, because Murphy's eyes, those strange amber eyes, looked more gold in the morning light. And when he turned to grab a plate from the cupboard, Teresa saw it. Scratches on his forearm, 4 parallel lines, deep, red, fresh, like something had clawed him. And Teresa Nolan realized, with a cold, sinking certainty, that she'd just moved in with a man who was hiding something, something big, something dangerous. And the worst part, she was too broke to leave. Chapter 3. Something in the Walls. That first night, Teresa couldn't sleep. Not because the bed was uncomfortable. It was the best mattress she'd touched in years. Not because the room was unfamiliar. It was cleaner and warmer than anywhere she'd lived since leaving her childhood home in New Jersey. She couldn't sleep because the house was alive. Old houses make noise. Teresa knew that. She'd lived in enough crumbling Boston apartments to know the difference between settling foundations and actual problems. But this was different. The Valgirder estate didn't settle. It breathed. At 11:34 p.m., Teresa lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening. The wind outside moved through the trees like whispers. The radiator hissed soft and rhythmic. Somewhere downstairs, a clock ticked, one of those old grandfather clocks that sounded like a heartbeat. She'd almost drifted off when she heard the first creak. Footsteps. Not hers, not distant, close. In the hallway, right outside her room. Teresa's eyes snapped open. She didn't move, didn't breathe, just listened. The footsteps were heavy, deliberate, not the quick patter of someone walking with purpose, but the slow, dragging weight of something pacing, back and forth, from one end of the hallway to the other. Teresa counted. 12 steps one way, pause, 12 steps back. Over and over. She glanced at her phone on the nightstand. 2:47 a.m. The witching hour. Great. Teresa sat up slowly. The sheets rustled louder than she wanted. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, bare feet touching the cold wood floor. She grabbed her phone, her only weapon, pathetic as it was, and tiptoed toward the door. The footsteps stopped. Teresa froze. Silence pressed against her eardrums, thick, suffocating, the kind of quiet that felt like something was holding its breath, waiting for her to make the next move. She reached for the doorknob. Her hand hovered an inch away. And then she heard it. A growl. Low, deep, guttural. Not human. Not even close to human. It rumbled through the walls like distant thunder, vibrating in her chest. The sound didn't belong in a house. It belonged in a forest. In the wild. Somewhere teeth and claws were survival tools, not metaphors. Teresa yanked her hand back like the doorknob had burned her. "Murphy?" Her voice came out small, shaky. No answer. The growl came again. Closer this time. Right on the other side of the door. Teresa's heart slammed against her ribs. She backed away from the door, her phone clutched in both hands like a talisman. Her brain screamed at her to do something. Open the door, call someone, climb out the window, but her body refused to cooperate. Then the footsteps started again, moving away, down the hallway, slow, heavy, descending the stairs with a rhythm that sounded almost methodical. Teresa stood frozen in the middle of her room until the house went silent again. She didn't sleep after that. She sat on the edge of the bed, lights on, staring at the door until the sky outside her window started to bruise purple with dawn. At 6:15 a.m., she heard different footsteps, lighter, human, moving downstairs toward the kitchen. Teresa waited 15 minutes. Then she got dressed. Jeans, oversized sweater, mismatched socks because her life was a mess, and went downstairs. Murphy was in the kitchen. Of course he was. Standing at the counter in a gray Henley, Sobe, and dark jeans, pouring coffee into a plain white mug, like this was a normal Tuesday morning. His hair was damp, freshly showered. He looked rested, calm, completely unbothered. Teresa leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, trying to look more confident than she felt. "Morning," Murphy said without looking up. "Morning." Teresa's voice was flat, suspicious. Murphy glanced at her. His amber eyes scanned her face, the dark circles, the tension in her jaw, the way she was gripping her own elbows. He didn't ask if she'd slept. He already knew the answer. Teresa swallowed, nodded, took her coffee, and left the kitchen. But here's the thing about Teresa Nolan. She'd never been good at letting things go. By 10 a.m., Murphy had left for wherever he went during the day. He didn't say, and Teresa didn't ask. The house was empty, quiet, and Teresa was alone with her thoughts and a growing list of red flags. Red flag 1. Mysterious. Growling at 2:47 a.m. Red flag 2. Claw marks. Murphy blamed on a fence. Red flag 3. A basement she wasn't allowed to enter. Red flag 4. The way Murphy had looked at her in the kitchen. Not threatening, but warning, like he was protecting her from something. Or protecting something from her. Teresa sat at the kitchen table with her laptop, pretending to apply for jobs. Instead, she Googled Murphy Valgirder Cambridge. Nothing useful. Property records. A few mentions in local real estate articles about historic renovations. No social media, no photos, no online presence beyond what was legally required. Valgirder estate history. The house had been in the Valgirder family for 8 generations, built in 1847, renovated in 1923, 1965, and 2018. No scandals, no murders, no hauntings. Just an old New England family with old New England money. Teresa leaned back in her chair, stared at the screen. Then she typed, "Unexplained growling in old houses." The results were predictably useless. Forums about raccoons in attics. advice columns about plumbing, one Reddit thread where someone insisted their house was haunted by a demon named Gerald. Teresa glanced at her cactus. "You're not a demon, are you, Gerald?" Gerald did not respond. She closed the laptop, looked around the kitchen, at the expensive appliances, the marble countertops, the window overlooking the garden, where fallen leaves collected in neat piles, like someone had arranged them on purpose. This house was beautiful, warm, safe. So why did Teresa feel like she was living with a loaded gun? Murphy came home at 6:30 p.m. Teresa heard the front door open, heard his keys hit the bowl in the entryway, heard his footsteps move through the house with that same deliberate weight. She was in the kitchen, cooking. She'd found chicken in the fridge, vegetables in the crisper, and figured if she was going to play housekeeper, she might as well actually cook something. Murphy appeared in the doorway. He looked tired. Not physically. His posture was still perfect, his movements still controlled, but something in his eyes. A heaviness. "Smells good," he said. "It's just stir-fry, nothing fancy." Murphy moved to the sink, washed his hands. Teresa watched him out of the corner of her eye. Watched the way his shoulders were tense, the way he kept rolling his neck like he was trying to shake something loose. "Long day?" Teresa asked, trying to sound casual. "Something like that." They ate in silence. Murphy at one end of the table, Teresa at the other. The only sound was silverware against plates, and the occasional creak of the house settling around them. Teresa broke first. "Can I ask you something?" Murphy looked up, guarded. "Depends." "Why do you need someone here at night?" Murphy set his fork down, leaned back in his chair. His amber eyes caught the light from the pendant lamp above the table, flashing gold for just a second. "Because I don't trust myself alone." Teresa blinked. "What does that mean?" Murphy stood, picked up his plate, walked it to the sink. When he spoke again, his back was to her. "It means you follow the rules, Teresa. You stay in your room at night. You don't ask questions. And you don't go in the basement. You do that, you'll be fine." He turned, met her eyes. "You don't? I can't guarantee what happens." And with that, Murphy Valgerder left the kitchen. Left Teresa sitting at the table with half a plate of stir-fry and a cold, creeping certainty that she'd just made a deal with someone, something, far more dangerous than an eviction notice. But the rent was frozen, and Teresa Nolan had nowhere else to go. So she stayed. Chapter 4. Breaking the Rule. For 3 days, Teresa played housekeeper. She cooked scrambled eggs and overcooked chicken. She vacuumed floors that didn't need vacuuming. She dusted bookshelves and pretended she wasn't reading the titles. Old leather-bound volumes on folklore, mythology, lunar cycles. She did laundry and noticed Murphy's clothes always smelled like pine and wet earth, even fresh out of the dryer. And every evening, like clockwork, Murphy disappeared. He'd finish dinner, rinse his plate, and say the same thing. "I've got work to do. Stay inside, lock your door." Then he'd walk out the back door into the woods behind the estate, and Teresa wouldn't see him again until morning. When he came back, his hair would be damp, his boots caked in mud, his eyes tired but alert, like he'd spent the night running from something, or chasing it. Teresa didn't ask. Murphy didn't explain. But on day 4, Teresa broke the one rule. It was 2:30 p.m. Murphy had left an hour earlier, something about a property inspection across town. The house was empty, silent except for the October wind rattling the windows. Teresa stood in the hallway on the first floor, staring at the basement door. It was plain, wooden, unremarkable except for the heavy-duty deadbolt and the fact that Murphy had explicitly, repeatedly told her never to open it. "Don't go in the basement, right? Because that's not suspicious at all." Teresa looked at the door, looked at the key hanging on a hook 5 feet away, in plain sight, like Murphy wasn't even trying to hide it. "This man has terrible operational security." She grabbed the key. Her hand shook as she slid it into the lock. The deadbolt turned with a heavy clunk that echoed through the empty house. Teresa's heart kicked up. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting Murphy to materialize out of thin air and stop her. He didn't. She opened the door. The stairs leading down were steep, narrow. The air smelled wrong, metallic and damp, like old pennies left in a wet basement. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, casting harsh yellow light that only reached halfway down. Teresa descended slowly, one hand on the railing, the other holding her phone with the flashlight on. The basement wasn't renovated. Murphy had lied about that. Or maybe he hadn't lied. Maybe he'd just let her assume. Because this wasn't construction. This was containment. The walls were reinforced steel, riveted into the foundation like a bunker. Chains hung from bolts drilled into the concrete floor. Thick, industrial chains with cuffs at the ends. The kind of chains you'd use to hold down something strong, something dangerous. And the scratches. Deep gouges carved into the concrete walls. Not random, frantic, desperate. Like something had tried to claw its way out and failed. Over and over again. Teresa's breath came shallow and fast. Her hands were shaking so hard, she almost dropped her phone. "What the hell?" "I told you not to come down here." Teresa spun around so fast she nearly fell. Murphy stood at the top of the stairs, backlit by the hallway light. His silhouette filled the doorway, broad shoulders, hands clenched at his sides. His face was in shadow, but she could feel his eyes on her, heavy, disappointed. "What is this?" Teresa's voice cracked. Murphy descended the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. When he reached the bottom, he stopped 5 feet away. Close enough that she could see his jaw was tight, his amber eyes darker than usual. A precaution. For what? Murphy's jaw worked. He looked at the chains, at the scratches on the walls, then back at her. For me. Teresa's brain tried to process that. Failed. Tried again. For you? Yes. Murphy, this looks like a torture chamber. It's not. His voice was flat, controlled. It's a cage. A cage! Teresa's voice pitched higher. You lock yourself in a cage? Why? What are you— And then it clicked. The growling, the scratches on his arm, the way he disappeared every night, the chains, the reinforced walls, the way his eyes sometimes caught the light wrong and flashed gold. Teresa's stomach dropped. Oh my God! Murphy didn't move, didn't blink, just watched her piece it together. You're not serious. I am. I'm a werewolf, Teresa. He said it like he was admitting he had gluten allergy, calm, matter of fact. And every full moon, I lock myself down here so I don't hurt anyone. Teresa stared at him. Her brain short-circuited, rebooted, crashed again. Say something, Murphy said quietly. Teresa opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. What came out was, I'm going back upstairs. Teresa, I'm going back upstairs to process the fact that my landlord just said he's a werewolf. She walked past him, up the stairs. Her legs felt like someone had replaced her bones with jelly. She made it to her room, closed the door, locked it, and then, very calmly, very rationally, screamed into her pillow. Here's the thing about finding out werewolves are real. You don't believe it, not right away. Your brain refuses. Because if werewolves are real, then what else is real? Vampires? Ghosts? Bigfoot? Does Bigfoot pay taxes? Does the IRS have a supernatural division? Teresa went through the stages of grief, but faster. Denial. He's joking. He has to be joking. This is some weird rich person hazing ritual. Anger. He's not joking, and I'm living with a monster. An actual monster, with teeth and claws. Who owns my apartment? Bargaining. Maybe he's just really into cosplay. Maybe he's in a LARP group. Maybe I misunderstood, and he said warehouse, and I heard werewolf. Depression. I can't afford to move out. I have $87. I'm trapped in a mansion with a werewolf because I'm too broke to have standards. Acceptance. Okay. Werewolf landlord. Sure. Why not? This might as well happen. Teresa reached acceptance around 4 a.m., staring at her ceiling, wondering if her life insurance from her old job was still active. The next morning, Teresa went downstairs. Murphy was in the kitchen, stirring oatmeal like he hadn't just admitted to being a mythological creature the night before. Teresa stood in the doorway. Prove it! Murphy looked up. Prove what? That you're a werewolf, because I'm not taking your word for it. Murphy sighed. Set the spoon down. You saw the basement. I saw a weird dungeon. That could mean anything. You could be into… Teresa waved her hand vaguely. Stuff. Murphy's eyebrow twitched. I'm not. Then prove you're a werewolf. It's not a party trick, Teresa. Then what is it? Murphy walked to the kitchen table, sat down heavily. For the first time since Teresa had met him, he looked tired. Not physically. His posture was still perfect, his shoulders still broad, but something in his eyes. A weariness that went bone deep. It's a curse. Teresa sat down across from him, slowly, like she was approaching a skittish animal. Murphy stared at his hands. I was born this way, my whole family was. The Valgerders have been wolves for 8 generations. It started with my great-great-great-grandfather. He made a deal with something he shouldn't have. Got power in exchange for his humanity. Passed it down through the bloodline. What kind of power? Strength, speed, healing. We're faster than humans, stronger. We live longer. Murphy's jaw tightened. But every full moon, we lose control. The wolf takes over. And if you're not locked up, if you're not contained… He stopped, looked at her. People die, Teresa. And you don't remember. You wake up the next morning covered in blood, and you don't know whose it is. Teresa's throat went dry. Have you ever… No? Murphy's voice was firm, hard. I've never killed anyone. Because I lock myself up. Every month, since I was 15. 15? That's when it starts. First shift. I was at a friend's house. Birthday party. I felt it coming. The fever, the anger. And I ran. Made it into the woods before I changed. Woke up the next morning, naked in a ditch, with no memory of how I got there. Murphy ran a hand through his hair. My dad found me. Brought me home. Built the cage. Taught me the rules. Control what you can. Contain what you can't. Teresa didn't know what to say. What do you say to that? Instead, she asked, why do you need me here? Murphy looked at her. His amber eyes caught the morning light streaming through the window, flashing gold for half a second. Because I don't trust myself alone. The wolf, it's smart. It knows how to pick locks. It knows how to break chains if they're not secured right. I need someone here to make sure I stay down there. To check the locks, to call someone if something goes wrong. Call who? There's a number on the fridge, under the photo magnet. If I don't come upstairs by sunrise after a full moon, you call it. A cleanup crew comes. They handle it. Teresa's stomach turned. Handle it! They make sure I don't hurt anyone. Murphy's voice was quiet, bleak. Even if that means putting me down. Silence filled the kitchen, heavy, suffocating. Teresa should have run. She should have packed Gerald and left. Found a shelter, a friend's couch, anything. But instead, she heard herself say, okay. Murphy blinked. Okay what? I'll stay, but we're adding a new rule. Which is… You don't lie to me again. Teresa leaned forward, elbows on the table. About anything. Even if it's weird. Especially if it's weird. No more secrets. No more don't ask questions. If I'm staying in this house, I need to know what I'm dealing with. Murphy studied her, like he was trying to figure out if she was serious or in shock. Then, slowly, he extended his hand across the table. Deal. Teresa shook it. His hand was warm, rough, calloused. And the moment their palms touched, she felt it, a warmth that spread up her arm and settled in her chest. Not uncomfortable, not painful, just there, like a connection had been made. A circuit completed. Murphy felt it too. She saw it in the way his eyes widened slightly. The way his grip tightened for half a second before he let go. Neither of them said anything about it. And that's how Teresa Nolan became the only person in Cambridge, Massachusetts, who knew her landlord turned into a wolf once a month. And somehow, against every survival instinct she had, she decided to stay. Because Murphy Valgerter had been honest, raw, vulnerable. And that was rarer than werewolves. Chapter 5. Trust Tension. 2 weeks in, and they'd stopped pretending this was temporary. Teresa cooked scrambled eggs every morning, burnt on the edges, exactly how Murphy never asked for but ate anyway. He'd tighten the loose cabinet hinge she'd been ignoring for months. She'd pepper him with questions while he worked. He'd answer like it cost him nothing. Raw meat, yes or no? Only if it's a good cut. Howling at the moon. Not unless I'm drunk. Tail? Teresa? It's a legitimate question. I'm not showing you anything. So that's a yes. She grinned. He didn't, but his mouth twitched, and that was close enough. But under all the back and forth, something else crept in. Not comfortable, not safe. Tension. The kind that made Teresa's skin buzz every time Murphy moved through a doorway. The kind that made her pulse spike when his shoulder grazed hers in the narrow hallway. The kind that put a hard edge in Murphy's voice whenever she laughed too loud, stayed up too late, existed too close. She started noticing things. The way his eyes tracked her across the room. The way his hands flexed when she leaned over the counter. The way he'd leave a room the second the air got too thick. One night, she caught him watching. What? Nothing. He turned, but not fast enough. You were staring. I wasn't. Murphy, you were. He exhaled hard, rubbed the back of his neck. You smell different. I what? Not bad, just different. Since you've been here, it's... He stopped, looked away. Forget it. No. She stepped closer. Say it. It's distracting. The word landed between them like a lit match. Distracting how? In a way that makes me want to ignore every rule I've got. Silence. What rules? The ones that keep me from getting close, from letting people in, from... He stopped, jaw tight. From what? From caring. Teresa opened her mouth to answer, but his phone rang. Sharp, loud, wrong. Murphy answered without looking away from her. When? His face went stone. I'll handle it. He hung up. What happened? Pack meeting, New York, tomorrow night. Pack meeting, like other werewolves. About 24. It's seasonal, required. Do they know about me? No, and they won't. You stay here. What if I don't want to? Teresa, I'm not asking for permission. Murphy took a step forward, close enough that she could feel the heat coming off him. It's dangerous. So is this. She didn't blink. Murphy stared at her, every instinct screaming at him to say no, to lock the door, to keep her as far from his world as possible. But instead, he said, pack a bag, we leave at dawn. And that's when things went from complicated to catastrophic. Because the pack meeting in New York? It wasn't just routine. Someone had called for Murphy's removal as alpha. And the penalty for losing? Death. But we're not there yet. First, Teresa had to survive the car ride from Cambridge to New York with a man who kept looking at her like she was both the solution and the problem. Buckle up. Chapter 6. The Pack. 4 hours on the road. Teresa filled the first 60 minutes with questions Murphy barely answered. What happens at these meetings? Is there protocol? Do you all sit in a circle and talk about feelings? It's wolves in a warehouse, arguing. So like Thanksgiving with my family. Without the pie. She smiled. He didn't. Red Hook, Brooklyn. Industrial zone. Graffiti on every surface, windows blacked out, bass vibrating through the brick walls. Murphy parked. Killed the engine. Stay close, don't talk unless I tell you to. Comforting. They walked inside. The warehouse was packed. 30, maybe 40 people scattered across the open floor. Leather jackets, tattoos, combat boots. They looked like any crowd you'd find in a dive bar on a Friday night. Until Teresa looked closer. Their eyes. Gold, silver, amber. Glowing faintly in the low light. Oh my God, they're all wolves, yeah. A woman cut through the crowd. Tall, sharp jaw, leather jacket tight across her shoulders. She moved like she owned the room. Murphy, you brought a human. It wasn't a question. She's with me, Sable. She circled Teresa slowly. Predator sizing up prey. Cute. She your midnight snack? Excuse me? He stepped between them, shoulder blocking Sable's view. She's off limits. She smiled, slow, knowing. Protective. That's new for you. A voice cut through the noise. Murphy Valgirder. The room went quiet. An older man stepped forward, scars across his neck, gray streaking his beard, the kind of presence that didn't need volume. You've been called here to answer a challenge. From who? Me. A younger wolf pushed through the crowd, mid-20s, built like he spent every waking hour in a gym. Cocky grin, fists already clenched. Name's Rook, and I'm claiming your territory. She leaned toward Murphy. Who is that? Nobody? He stepped closer, eyes locked on Murphy. You've gone soft, Valgirder. Everyone knows it. Word is you're keeping pets now. His gaze slid to Teresa. Human pets. His voice dropped, low, dangerous. Walk away, Rook. Or what? You'll protect her? He grinned. Prove it. Rook moved. Not toward Murphy. Toward Teresa. Fast, too fast for a human to track. But Murphy was faster. He intercepted mid-lunge, caught Rook by the throat, slammed him into the concrete floor hard enough to crack it. One hand pinning him down, claws out, eyes blazing gold. His voice came out wrong, layered, half human, half something else. Touch her again, I dare you. The room froze. She spoke quietly, but everyone heard. He's marked her. Marked me? What does that mean? You're his mate. His what? Murphy released Rook, stood, his breathing uneven, claws still visible. He turned to Teresa. His eyes were glowing. We're leaving. Murphy, what is she talking about? Not here. He grabbed her wrist, not rough, but firm. No room for argument. Murphy, now. He pulled her toward the exit. The crowd parted. No one stopped them. Chapter 7. Mate bond. They made it to the car before Teresa spoke. Explain, right now. I didn't want you finding out like that. Finding out what? He turned, looked at her straight on. You're my mate, Teresa. You're what? My mate, the one person I'm hardwired to protect, to bond with, to... He stopped. To what? To love. Silence. The kind that fills your chest and makes breathing feel optional. This is completely insane. Yeah, it is. I came here because I was broke, not because I wanted to be someone's cosmic soulmate. You think I chose this? Then reject it. Reject me. Whatever you have to do. He stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to hold his gaze. I can't. Why not? Because every instinct I've got is screaming at me to keep you close, to keep you safe. And when Rook went for you tonight? His voice cracked. I would have ripped his throat out. Teresa didn't move. This man, this wolf, who'd given her a roof when she had nowhere else to go, who'd answered her ridiculous questions with more patience than anyone ever had, who'd cooked her breakfast and fixed her broken cabinets and looked at her like she was something worth protecting. So what happens now? Now you choose, stay or leave. I'm not forcing anything. And if I stay, then you're in this. My world, my pack, my life, all of it. That's a lot to ask. I know. She took a breath, stepped closer. What if I'm not ready? Then I wait. No hesitation, no conditions. Teresa looked up at him, at the man who'd gone halfway to wolf in a room full of predators just to keep her safe, who'd claimed her without asking, who was standing here now, offering her the only thing that mattered. A choice. She kissed him. Hard, fast, no warning. It wasn't soft, wasn't tentative. It was a decision made with mouths and heat, and the kind of certainty that bypasses logic entirely. When they broke apart, Murphy's eyes were glowing gold, brighter than before. You sure about this? Not even remotely. She kissed him again. But I'm staying. Murphy pulled her in, arms around her waist, forehead pressed to hers, breathing like he'd just run 10 miles. You have no idea what you just signed up for. Then I guess you'll have to show me. His grip tightened. This doesn't come with an exit plan, Teresa. Once you're in, I'm in. She said it like a challenge, like a promise. Murphy kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, the kind of kiss that rewrites the last 2 weeks into something neither of them could take back. When they finally pulled apart, his hands were shaking. We should go. Where? Home. The word landed different now. Not his house, not her temporary crash pad. Home. Yeah, let's go home. They drove back in silence, but this time it wasn't awkward. It wasn't tense. It was the kind of quiet that happens when everything just shifted, and neither of you knows how to talk about it yet. Teresa's hand found Murphy's on the gear shift. He didn't pull away. He laced their fingers together and drove one-handed all the way back to Seattle. Chapter 8. Full Moon. 3 nights later, the full moon climbed over Cambridge. Teresa stood in the basement, Murphy beside her. Heavy-duty chains bolted to the wall. Steel-reinforced door. Every precaution in place. You don't have to lock yourself in. It's safer this way. For who? For you. I trust you. You shouldn't. His voice was already strained. The moon hadn't even reached full height yet, and his hands were shaking, claws pushing through fingertips. Teresa didn't leave. She sat down on the concrete floor, back against the opposite wall, arms wrapped around her knees. Teresa, I'm staying. You don't know what you're asking. Then show me. The transformation started at midnight. Violent, brutal, every bone in Murphy's body breaking and reforming, skin stretching, muscles tearing. His scream turned into a howl halfway through. Teresa flinched, but she didn't run. The wolf that stood in Murphy's place was massive, 7 feet tall, silver-gray fur, eyes glowing gold, fangs bared. It lunged at the chains. They held. Barely. The wolf snarled, thrashed, slammed against the restraints, hard enough to crack the concrete behind them. Teresa stood up. Murphy? The wolf froze. It's okay, I'm here. The wolf's eyes locked on her, predatory, hungry. But Teresa didn't back down. I know you're in there, I know you can hear me. The wolf growled, low, guttural. You're not going to hurt me. She took a step forward. You couldn't if you tried. Another step. Because you're mine, and I'm yours. The wolf stopped thrashing. Its breathing slowed. Teresa walked right up to the chains, close enough to touch. See? I'm not scared of you. The wolf stared at her, and for the first time in 8 years, since the night Murphy was turned, the wolf sat down. Calm. Controlled. Still watching Teresa like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Morning came slow. Teresa woke up stiff, cold, her back aching from sleeping on concrete. Murphy was human again, slumped against the wall, chains broken, but not violently, like he'd just unlocked them. The basement was intact. No claw marks, no destruction. He opened his eyes, saw Teresa curled up in his flannel jacket 5 feet away. "You stayed." She sat up, rubbed her eyes. "Told you I would. I could have hurt you. But you didn't. Teresa. You didn't." She crawled over to him, sat beside him, shoulder to shoulder. "For the first time you stayed in control. You know why?" "Why?" "Because I was here." 6 months later, Teresa never moved out. She finished her master's degree in public health. Murphy sold 2 more properties and reinvested in low-income housing across Seattle. They adopted a golden retriever named Biscuit, who had zero awareness of personal space. Every full moon, Teresa sat with Murphy in the basement. And every time, he stayed in control. Because the mate bond wasn't just some supernatural rule. It was a tether, a lifeline, the one thing strong enough to keep the wolf from taking over completely. Love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who sees every broken, dangerous, impossible part of you and stays anyway. Teresa stayed. And Murphy? He finally stopped running. So here's the real question. If you made it this far, if you actually stuck around for this entire story, why haven't you hit subscribe yet? No, seriously, I'm asking. Drop a comment. Tell me what's holding you back. Because stories like this don't write themselves. They take hours, research, rewrites, late nights staring at a screen trying to get the pacing just right. And if you loved it, the algorithm needs to know. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment your country so I know where you're listening from. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Let's build this pack together. Thanks for tuning in to Gracie Werewolf Story Bank. Until next time, stay wild.